Dust coiled to the midday heat like smoke from a wound, drifting between the warped boards of dry hollows, trading posts where half the town had gathered to gawk. The porch sagged under the weight of onlookers. Men with hats low and morals lower, women pretending not to stare, children peering out from behind skirts. It was a hot day for cruelty, but they came anyway. Lena Dawson stood in the sun, her wrists bare but posture bound by shame. She wore a faded blue dress that once belonged to her mother, though nothing of her mother remained but the threadbare collar and the memory of softer days. Her jaw was set tight, not in defiance but in survival, her gaze fixed on a fence post in the distance, as if she could will herself into wood. If she blinked, she feared the tears would rise. So she didn't. "This girl," Edna Dawson said, voice crisp as snapped twine, "ain't got any prospects. She's a burden to my household, and not worth the bread she eats. I'm offering her up fair, $5 flat." Gasps and snickers rippled through the crowd. A drunk near the saloon door laughed loudest, hoisting a dirty bottle like a torch. "I'll give $2 for the dress. Don't need the woman." A few folks chuckled, others turned their heads. No one stepped forward. Silas Reed, the town's self-appointed clerk, shifted awkwardly behind a crooked table, fidgeting with his ledger like it could shield him from guilt. "Edna, this isn't proper law. You can't sell folks." "I'm not selling her," Edna said sweetly. "I'm relieving myself of her upkeep. She's free to leave with whoever wants a burden. The price is just to make it clear this ain't charity." Lena didn't move, her palms pressed flat against her thighs to keep them from trembling. A wasp buzzed near her ear. She didn't flinch. A silence settled, dry and taut. Then a voice broke through, deep, low, and unhurried. "I'll take her." Heads turned. From the edge of the crowd, a man stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered in a worn trail coat. He walked like the land had shaped him. Quiet, deliberate, no need for show. Colt Merrick, the widower rancher from the East Mesa. Folks said he'd buried a wife, a child, and the better part of himself years ago. He rarely spoke, never smiled, but his eyes were gray that saw more than they let on. He laid $5 silver on the warp table. No bargaining, no smirk, just silence. Edna's mouth twitched, the protest dying in her throat as the coins glinted under the sun. Silas hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Fair transaction. Guess that's that." Colt turned to Lena. He didn't reach for her, just waited. She could have said no, could have run, but there was something in the stillness, like water that hadn't yet decided to freeze or flow. And after years of being pushed, spoken over, ordered and offered, a man who simply waited was unfamiliar mercy. She stepped down. They walked side by side down the porch steps, through the crowd that parted like brush before fire. Whispers trailed behind them, judgments and assumptions. Some said she was bought. Others said he'd taken pity. A few just watched, eyes heavy with something close to envy. The road out of town shimmered in the heat. They rode in silence. Colt on a chestnut mare, Lena sidesail behind on a bay with uneven gait. He kept his eyes ahead, but once, when she coughed against the dust, he passed her a kerchief without a word. His ranch sat tucked between low hills and sunburnt mesquite, modest and still. The house was 2 rooms wide, with a porch that caught the evening breeze, and a barn whose doors groaned like tired bones. Chickens scattered as they arrived. A dog lifted its head from under the wagon and wagged once before settling again. Colt dismounted, tied his reins, and offered a hand to help her down. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm, calloused, steady. Inside, the house smelled of leather and old pine. He showed her the guest room, small, clean, with a bed already made and a folded quilt at the end. "You can stay here," he said simply. "No one comes out this way, and I don't ask for work." She turned to face him, unsure what she'd expected. Rules, threats, a list of duties. Instead, he only nodded once and left her be. The door clicked shut behind him. She sat on the edge of bed and looked at her hands. They still trembled, faintly. Her whole life had been shaped by what others saw in her: weakness, nuisance, currency. This man, for reasons she couldn't name, saw something else. Or maybe nothing at all. Maybe that was the mercy. The sun dipped low. Outside, she heard him moving about the yard, feeding the horses, dragging water, a quiet rhythm of survival. At some point, the smell of stew wafted in, rich with carrots and bone. She found a bowl waiting at the table, still steaming. No words, no instructions. That night, she lay beneath the quilt, tracing the seams with her fingers, wondering how silence could feel less like punishment and more like space to breathe. She woke before dawn. The sky was still violet when she crept to the porch. He was already there, seated on the step, sipping coffee from a tin cup, hat pulled low. She sat a few feet away. He didn't look at her, just passed her the cup. The warmth surprised her. She sipped. Neither spoke. But when the first light broke the ridge, it caught on his profile, scarred, solemn, quietly kind, and she saw something flicker there just behind his eyes. Not sorrow, not pity, recognition. It startled her, because for the first time in a very long time, she realized she wasn't invisible. And somewhere deep in her chest, something shifted. Not enough to name, but enough to stay. The days passed like a slow-turning wheel, soft-spoken and quiet, the kind that didn't announce change but carried it anyway. Lena rose early, not because she was asked, but because waking to the light without command felt like a kind of freedom. She swept the porch in her bare feet, dust trailing in graceful arcs behind her, and fed the chickens without being seen. Colt never asked anything of her, and still, she found herself doing things. The silence between them wasn't harsh. It lived easy, like rain-slick stone, holding its own rhythm. She cooked when she could. He repaired a broken hinge on her window. They passed in and out of one another's space like shadow and wind, always aware, never colliding. There were no locks on the doors, no curfews, no leash dressed as kindness. Sometimes she caught him watching, not in the way men in town had stared, hungry and cruel, but with a stillness that made her breath pause. Like he wasn't trying to figure her out, just witness her. He always looked away first, eyes dropping to the dirt, as if ashamed of something he hadn't done. One morning, as dew clung to the fence posts and the sky warmed from greater rose, she found a small bunch of wildflowers on the windowsill. No note, no fanfare, just left there, awkward and lovely. She traced the petals with her fingers, and something inside her, a tight, dry knot, unwound just a little. That evening, as she was kneading bread, Colt stepped into the kitchen. His boot stopped just past the threshold. "I've got to ride into town tomorrow," he said. "General Store's near out of salt and oil." She wiped her hands and nodded, expecting no more. But then, after a pause, he added, "You're welcome to come, only if you'd like." It wasn't the invitation that startled her. It was the way he offered it, as though her answer might matter more than the salt. The next day, she sat beside him in the wagon, back straight, hands clasped in her lap. The road wound through gullies and open plains, yellow grasses hissing beneath the wheels. Colt didn't speak, but she felt the occasional glance, checking, maybe, or just making sure she was real. Dry Hollow was smaller than she remembered, though the stairs were not. The whispers fell behind them like tumbleweeds. There she is, bought for $5. Think she's more now? She kept her chin high, her eyes ahead. Inside the general store, May Withers, the owner, gave a startled smile. "Well, bless my bones. Lena Dawson, is that really you?" Lena hesitated. "I go by Lena," she said simply. May's eyes softened. "You look well, girl." "You do." May filled their order quickly, slipping a wrapped package of honeycomb in the bag with a wink. "On the house." Back at the wagon, Colt said nothing. But when he handed her the reins and let her steer the team home, something cracked between them, small, like a seed breaking open in dirt. She'd been offered trust, not because she'd earned it, because he chose to give it. That night, she sang softly while washing dishes, the melody half-formed and wordless. When she turned, she found Colt standing in the doorway, still and quiet. "You've got a good voice," he said. She shrugged. "It's only ever been mine." He nodded like that mattered more than she realized. Later, as she brushed her hair in the glow of a lantern, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. There was color in her cheeks now. Her shoulders no longer curled inward. She looked not happy, but alive. It unsettled her. She didn't know what to do with the parts of herself no longer afraid. She found him outside near the barn, tightening a latch on the paddock gate. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow, forearms nicked with old scars. She hesitated, then stepped closer, holding out a bundle wrapped in linen. "Bread," she said, "from yesterday." He accepted it without a word, their hands brushing. Warm, calloused. "Rio, why did you do it?" she asked. His brow furrowed. "By me?" The air grew thick. Cicadas whirred in the trees. He looked at her, not with possession, not with pride, just quiet grief. "Because no one else saw you," he said. "And I couldn't be one more man who looked away." She didn't answer. Couldn't. Something rose in her throat, tender and burning. That night, she couldn't sleep. The moon spilled silver across the floorboards, casting long shadows that bent like memories. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside. The wind lifted her hair, and for the first time in years, she let it move freely. Across the yard, Colt sat on the porch, elbows on knees, staring at nothing. She walked to him slowly. "I'm not broken," she said. His gaze lifted to hers. "I know, but I don't know who I am yet." "You don't have to." She sat beside him, closer than she meant to. They didn't speak for a long while. When she leaned her head on his shoulder, he didn't flinch. He just breathed in slowly, like the world had turned quieter somehow. And in the morning, tucked inside the fold of her shawl, she found a carved wooden comb, smooth, simple, shaped by someone who knew the difference between mending and fixing. She held it to her chest, eyes closed, because for the first time in her life, someone had given her something not to use, but to keep. The morning of the summer fair broke warm and windless, the air already thick with the scent of dust and fried apples. Dry Hollow came alive with chatter and bunting. Stalls painted bright with color that almost masked the way folks whispered beneath their breaths. Colt stood near the wagon, reins in hand, hat low over his eyes. Lena stepped out of the mercantile, wearing a simple cream dress and the carved wooden comb he'd given her tucked into her hair. It wasn't new, not store-bought, but it held her like a crown. People watched them. They always had. But something in the way she walked now, unhurried, shoulders square, made their stares falter. They moved through the fairground like a current beneath calm water. Lena smiled faintly at May Withers near the pie stall, nodded to a little girl who offered her a wildflower. Colt stayed close, but not possessive. They didn't touch, didn't need to. Every gesture between them had long since become a quiet promise. She didn't see Edna Dawson until the crowd thinned. The voice came like cracked stone. "Well, there she is, all polished up." Lena froze mid-step. Edna stood beside the preacher's tent, dressed in black silk that shimmered like oil, arms folded and mouth curved in something too cold to be called a smile. The crowd hushed. Colt turned slowly, shoulders tightening. "You think wearing someone else's scraps makes you a lady now?" Edna said, voice raised. "You think being dragged off like cattle and playing house with a recluse makes you better than your kin?" Lena felt every eye shift toward her, hungry for spectacle, unsure whether to look away. "I'm not yours," Lena said quietly. Edna's lip curled. "The loss is otherwise. You were given over without proper writ. You're not even his to keep." "She's not a mule, Edna," Colt said, stepping forward, voice low. "She's not something to be kept." "She's not your wife either, is she?" Edna snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "No papers, no claim, no vow. That girl's still mine in the eyes of court." Lena's heart slammed against her ribs. The old fear surged, hot, thick, poisonous. She saw it in Edna's smirk, the belief that shame still held the leash. But Colt didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He looked at Lena, not with pity, with trust. She stepped forward. "I was never yours," she said, voice calm. "You wore me like a bruise. But I'm not the thing that hurt you. I was the thing you couldn't break." The crowd went still. Edna opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her face flushed deep with rage. but there was nowhere for it to land. Lena's words hung heavy, like thunder that didn't need lightning to be felt. Colt touched Lena's elbow gently. "Come on," he said. "This isn't our dust to breathe." They turned together. The crowd parted without a word. Back at the ranch, Lena moved through the house like a woman unburdened. She took her hair down at the mirror, watching her reflection the way one studies a stranger who might become a friend. She ran her fingers over the curve of her cheek, the smoothness of the wooden comb in her palm. Colt was outside in the barn, mending a latch with slow, even hands. She stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the last gold light of day. "I thought it would feel louder," she said. He looked up, standing up to her, but it felt like water finally spilling out. He nodded, wiping his hands on a rag. "She made you feel small. That's a hard thing to unlearn." Lena stepped inside. The barn smelled of hay and dust, warm wood, and something sweeter, like time itself had softened the air. "I'm not afraid of her anymore," she said. "You shouldn't be. I'm not afraid of myself anymore either." Colt's eyes lingered on hers. "I'm glad," he said. Silence stretched between them, not empty, but rich with something unspoken. "I want to stay," she said, voice almost a whisper. "You already have. I mean properly, not as someone who owes you bread or safety or thanks." He swallowed. "Then stay as my equal, not my guest." She stepped closer, heart thudding slow and certain. "I don't need a ring to mean something," she said. "But if I were yours, it would be because I chose it. Not because I was bought. Not because I was saved. Because I saw you. And you saw me." Colt reached into his coat and pulled something wrapped in cloth. "I carved this for you months ago," he said. "Didn't know if I'd ever find the right time." She opened it slowly. Inside was a plain wooden band, sanded smooth, a faint flower etched along the inside curve. It was imperfect, but it was steady. It was honest. Like him, she slipped it onto her finger and smiled. They didn't kiss. They didn't need to. Later, as dusk bled into stars and the ranch fell into hush, Lena sat on the porch, blanket around her shoulders. The air held the scent of sage and summer, and the wind curled gentle around her ankles like it, too, had learned how to soften. Colt joined her with 2 mugs of coffee. They sat together, eyes on the sky, and as the moon rose full and clear, Lena turned to him and asked quietly, "What do you think people saw when they looked at me that day?" $5 and a broken girl. Colt didn't look away. "No," he said. "I think they saw a woman learning how to belong to herself." And beside him, she finally believed it.